Hi, and welcome to this short PowerPoint where I introduce you to some background to the Elijah stories found in 1 Kings chapter 17 through 19. One of the things which was found, or one of the sites which was discovered in the 1920s by a Syrian farmer, was this site called Ras Shamra in modern Syria along the coast. You can see it in red, indicated as Ugarit, along the northern coast of the Mediterranean. A farmer was actually plowing a field, happened upon some stones, discovered clay tablets, and lo and behold, we discover a great city that actually occupied a significant space within ancient Canaanite history, approximately 2000 to 1200 BC, when it finally sort of disappears from history, and we discover it in the 1920s. One of the things which this particular find has helped with the Elijah stories has to do with the worship of Baal and numerous texts which were found which point to a positive view of the worship of Baal. Much of what we have known previously, of course, comes from Scripture. Scripture taking obviously a very negative view of Baal. So, this is one of those insights where we begin to hear from an insider perspective things which might help us to better unpack, better understand the ancient context of the worship of Baal. So within the city, there were numerous temples and texts found. The one which pertains to our particular story the most pointedly is what is called the Baal cycle. It's actually included on 3 different tablets. You can see actually in the top left corner, I have a small clay tablet that includes the cuneiform Ugaritic writing. That would be the language of this ancient city of Ugarit. And then in the top right, there's actually an image of Lady Atarat, who is the goddess sometimes worshipped under the name Asherah among the Canaanites. In the Baal cycle, which pertains to our story in 1 Kings 17 through 19, as Yahweh shows his competition with the newly imported deity Baal. Now, not that Baals were not worshipped, but Baal Hadad, this particular Phoenician influence coming out of Tyre, under the influence of the queen Jezebel, who had married into the Ahab family. We'll take a look here a little closer. The 3 poetic tales, these 3 tablets that are included, and here in the top left, just noting an image of El, who is the chief deity in the Canaanite pantheon, and Baal Hadad here on the bottom right. He would be holding lightning, and that's usually what he's associated with. The tablet that is noted in the top right is actually part of the Baal cycle, this 3-volume set. In the first volume, there's this extended story, it's all told in poetic style, about Baal and Yam, Yam being the sea, and Baal's battle with Yam. In the second of the tales, it is a request for Baal to receive a house. Of course, a house is just a common word for what we would refer to for a deity as a temple. That's where gods live. That's their house. So in the Baal cycle, Baal will receive a house, which initially is asked to be rather just a simple house like all the other gods, but in the end he ends up with a house decorated with gold and silver and lapis lazuli, which is a brilliant blue. The final one is the one that pertains to our stories of Elijah most clearly. And it is the story of Baal and Mot, Mot being death. Baal will battle death, Baal being the god who brings the rains, who brings the dew, who causes storms, who causes fertility, so that animals increase, so that crops grow. He is the one who is supposedly managing the cycles of life in the land. For a time in the tale, Baal is defeated by Mot, and he is taken into the grave. Now, Anat, Baal's lover, and her father, El, the high god, both mourn for Baal with great weeping, longing for his restoration, that the land itself would be restored. But they begin to weep and wail and call out. And finally, the text says they literally plow their backs like fields, carving with knives as they cry out for the resurrection of Baal. As an aside, just so that you're aware, Baal simply means owner, lord, or master. It's used in Hebrew as it is in other Canaanite dialects, Ugaritic being one of those. It does not have to necessarily refer to the official name of the deity, of whom the Ugaritic deity is known as Hadad. That's his proper name. He, according to our reconstruction, takes over for El, the high god of the Canaanite pantheon, and becomes the chief deity of the Canaanites, and of course of Ahab's reign under his wife's influence, Jezebel's influence. Now, let me just mention that he had two daughters. His first daughter was Artse. His second daughter, Pidrai and Midrai, being Dew and Rain, his second and third daughters. Now, in our Elijah stories, this is where we pick up, 1 Kings 17 and 18. Yahweh stops the rain and the dew, which becomes a direct confrontation with Baal, Baal's family, Baal's authority. Yahweh is the one who says he gives increase and abundance over his people Israel, indeed over all the land. He's the one who gives life, so that even a widow who lives in Syrophoenicia, who lives right in the very precincts of the heartland of Baal worship, she will actually be provided for by Yahweh, the God of Israel, who gives life, who gives abundance, who gives increase. Indeed, Yahweh is the God who answers. Baal is away, he's preoccupied or dead. And this plays out in, of course, the confrontation on Mount Carmel, where Elijah challenges the prophets of Baal, and it says the God who truly is God, who's alive, he will answer by fire. And this is akin to that Baal cycle tale where El and Anat cry out and even begin to cut themselves. In our story, I'd often wondered, why do the prophets of Baal, after being teased by Elijah, dancing in a frenzy, crying out, why do they begin to cut themselves? Only to be reminded in discovering this text that had been lost to history until the 20s, that indeed in their own theology, in their own telling of the stories of their gods, that the gods themselves had cut themselves in order to try to revive Baal, which succeeds in the story of Baal and Mot. Of course, in our story, the prophets of Baal become like the god Baal, dead. Indeed, Baal cannot bring rain or dew or fruitfulness. This is the job of Yahweh. He alone has power over the land. Baal is silent, absent, powerless, and dead, despite the cries and slashing frenzy of his prophets. And those who serve Baal will find themselves becoming like what they worship, while those who serve Yahweh will find themselves becoming like what they worship. I hope this has been helpful to you as you reflect on a little bit of the insight of context in our story of Elijah, where this is less a story about the prophet and more a story about the God of Israel, and which God is truly God over this land and this people.